Good afternoon. We're back with another Marvel Snap video, and the focus of this video is to give some guidelines and tips for a good snap strategy. When to snap and when to retreat. This is the biggest factor that will determine whether you climb or not in Marvel Snap, by far bigger than your choice of deck, although the choice of deck is not unimportant. In my climb this month from rank 10 up to rank 100, 100 plus, 100 so far, my win rate was about 56%, which is nothing exceptional. I was able to climb in what I would consider a relatively efficient manner primarily because of my snap strategy. And so I'll be giving some guidelines and talking about my plays. This recording is from around ranks 56 to 59, and from looking at the forums or the Marvel Snap subreddit, I've seen a lot of players seem to be stuck there. So I will be talking about my opponent's plays, my plays in games, and I will be talking primarily about turns 5 and 6. For newer players, or for players who are struggling to climb, my recommendation would be don't decide whether to snap or not until just before your turn 5 play. Turn 5, after turn 4, before turn 5 is, in my mind, the decision point for concerning whether we snap or not. I rarely fold or retreat if my opponent snaps before turn 6. I will decide whether I am going to snap before my turn 5 play usually, though not always. And then, before my turn 6 play, I will decide whether I'm going to retreat or go to showdown. And so in this video, I will talk about my thoughts in each of these situations, and I believe there are 14 games in this video that we will talk about, 10 wins and 4 losses in this situation, and we'll talk about why I snapped or didn't snap in each situation, and in hindsight, we will talk about good decisions that were made, bad decisions that were made, and how the games turned out. I am playing a Spectrum ongoing deck in this video, and let's dive in and start with the first game. This situation, on turn 5, I'm looking at first, what are my 5 and 6 plays? And in this situation, it's very likely my play is going to be Claw and Iron Man, along with Ant-Man, to use my 5 energy on turn 5 and my 6 energy on turn 6. The guideline that I'm looking for, there are 2 reasons why I will snap. Number 1, I believe that I'm going to win 2 lanes by at least 9 before my opponent reveals his turn 6 play. So let's say I count up my power and I determine I'm going to play Claw on Olympia. That will give me 15 power at Wakanda. And then if I play Iron Man on Olympia, Claw will give me 15 power on Wakanda, 13 power on Olympia, plus 1 for Captain America's 14 power on Olympia. And if I play Iron Man, that will give me 15 at Wakanda, maybe plus 1 for Ant-Man, 16 at Wakanda, and 26 at Olympia. That's a very strong play. I'm not sure in this situation if I've snapped already or if my opponent has. But given that I'll be up by 14 at Olympia, up by 15 at Wakanda, that's strong enough for me to snap. And let's see what happens here. And then we'll talk about my opponent's play as well. Normally I don't like to criticize opponents publicly, but for the sake of this video I'm just going to blur out all their names so that I don't embarrass anyone. Now, this is a mistake that my opponent has made, and let's talk about why that's a mistake. My opponent filled up Olympia with all 4 slots full, no way to move any characters, and he filled them up prior to turn 6, and with me with one slot open. This means I know exactly how much power I need at Olympia in order to win the location. My opponent has 19 there. I have determined that he's playing a destruction deck. Destruction decks don't typically run Blue Marvel, nor do they typically run any way to project power into other lanes. So 19 power is probably all my opponent is going to have there. This is a very, very common mistake that I see, particularly in the early ranks. And if you're struggling to rank up, it's likely that you're making this mistake often. I know I make this mistake from time to time. And the mistake is not leaving yourself an open slot at a location going into the last turn. And the reason it's a mistake is because it gives your opponent too much information about how to optimally play their cards. So I know in this situation, I have identified their deck. Their deck is a destruction deck. I've made that determination based on Bucky Barnes and the Winter Soldier, Deathlock, Carnage, and Wolverine. I know generally destruction decks don't project power into other lanes or play Blue Marvel. Nonetheless, I could account for that if I want to. I know that I have 14 power and my opponent has 19. Therefore, I know if I get 6 more power at Olympia, that's a guaranteed lane win. Simply playing Claw at that location will give me 4 for Claw, 1 for Captain America, and then an additional 5 for Iron Man, so an additional 10. That'll put me at 24, plus 5 at Olympia. That is Blue Marvel proof. In addition, Claw will give me 15 power at Wakanda, which is plus 14. This is an absolute guaranteed snap. From my opponent's point of view, he is up by only 5 at Olympia. He doesn't have any other way to add power there. With Iron Man, I require only a 3 power card to top him at Olympia, and he trails at Wakanda by 8. I would 100% retreat in my opponent's situation. And I would 100% snap in my situation as I have a guaranteed lane win, and I'm up by 14 in the other lane. Here are some guidelines, some general rules to follow concerning when to snap or not. A guaranteed lane win should almost always be a snap. Not always, but almost always, and you're often going to get guaranteed lane wins when your opponent fills up their side of the board and you haven't filled up yours and you're within shouting distance of them. That's almost always going to be a snap. Another condition that I mentioned earlier is if I'm up by at least 8 or 9 in 2 lanes, I'll snap. And another one is if I can unexpectedly remove power from my opponent's board that I feel will give me a win. And the primary ways of doing that in Pool 1 and 2, which is where this video was made, are Elektra, Killmonger, Shang-Chi, Enchantress. Occasionally, you'll be able to block something with Cosmo, like a no-look block where you reveal first and you know where your opponent's going to play and what they're going to play. That's not as common, though. Generally, it's going to be Shang-Chi, Killmonger, or Enchantress. And if you have a way to remove a significant amount of power from the opponent's board, I'll snap on that. In this case, due to the guaranteed lane win at Olympia and the plus 14 power at Wakanda, this is an automatic snap. If I was on my opponent's side and I was only up by 5 at Olympia, meaning my opponent only needed a 3 power card to top me there, and I was down by 8 at Wakanda, I would automatically retreat every single time. In this case, it's entirely possible this opponent is a bot. We never really know for sure, though we can guess at it. At this rank, there are going to be some bots. Nonetheless, we will analyze their play. And in this case, my opponent does play to Wakanda. And he does play enough with the Enchantress to win Wakanda, but only by 3 power. And so with the 6 power that I project there, and the 10 power that Claw provides at Olympia, it is a victory. And an 8-cube victory, as my opponent had previously snapped in the game. An avoidable mistake, which they could have avoided by simply waiting until later in the game in order to snap. Wait until turn 5 is my recommendation for all newer players or players who are struggling to climb. Wait until turn 5 until you are more confident in your gameplay. Wait until prior to turn 5, just after turn 4. Moving on to the next game, we arrive at turn 5 with no good turn 5 play. I'm in a rough spot here. I'm only up by 1 power at Subterranea, no power at Daily Bugle. I do not have slot advantage on my opponent. He has only 2 at Subterranea, 2 at Daily Bugle. With Jessica Jones, he's even going to be +4. So I'm down 7 power to 11 there. And I have no turn 5 play except rocks. I will 100% retreat in this situation if my opponent snaps. If they do not snap, I will go to turn 6 and see what the situation is, but likely retreat at that point. The reason that I will retreat if my opponent snaps is that I have no chance of meeting my own snap conditions and no chance of going into turn 6 ahead on the board. I can't establish a lead of at least 8 or 9 at 2 locations. I can't eliminate power from my opponent's board in an unexpected way. Another situation in which I'll sometimes snap is if I have a lead at 3 locations and I think it will be hard for my opponent to win 2 of them. I don't have that condition in this situation either, and given that I have no turn 5 play, this is an instant retreat if my opponent snaps. If they don't snap, I'll let the game go until turn 6 and then I'll retreat there most likely. So I decide to play just a rock to Subterranea to fill the location for Ant-Man's buff, and I still have the option of moving Nightcrawler, so I can still play a card there, so I don't commit the cardinal sin of filling a location before turn 6. In this case, my opponent snaps. I would too in their situation. I have advantage at Subterranea in that I have a slot free and my opponent doesn't. But there's no conceivable way, given my hand, that I can win both locations. I could play Spectrum to Daily Bugle and probably win that location, but I would lose Subterranea. All my opponent would need to do is play a 1-drop to Nowhere and I'd lose that one. I have a 10-point deficit at Subterranea, 4-point at Daily Bugle. No conceivable way to make up that difference. Therefore, this is an instant retreat for me. Nonetheless, it's wise to look at every card carefully and make sure nothing is being missed. But I can't imagine a way to win 2 locations here. I could win 1, and if my opponent decided not to play anything to Nowhere, it's possible that I could win on differential, but really unlikely. I don't have confidence in Nightcrawler getting a cheeky win at Nowhere. It is possible that Nightcrawler to Nowhere and then Spectrum to mid wins Nowhere and Daily Bugle. But I'm not willing to go 4 cubes on that. I can get better situations. We're looking for guarantees when we snap, not maybe I'll win. If you're struggling to climb, it's likely that you're seeing too many showdowns, and probably one of the reasons is that you're thinking, well, I have a chance to win, so I don't want to retreat. You can go to showdown for 2 cubes for that. Even then, I don't really like doing it. But if you think you have a chance to win, but no guarantees, I would almost never go to a showdown for 4 cubes, and certainly not for 8. If you're doing that, you need to have a much better than average chance of winning to go to showdown for 4 cubes. In an 8 cube, you should consider a guaranteed win. You're not always going to be right, because it's very difficult to remember every single card that could come into play. But that should be the thought process if you're going to a showdown for 8 cubes or for 4. Moving on to the next game. In this situation, I have a 9 power lead at Stark Tower. I have a 12 power deficit at Gamma Lab, and I haven't played anything to Dark Dimension. In this case, I really like my position because I can play Iron Man to Stark Tower, albeit 26 to 4 in my favor, and I can play Shang-Chi at Gamma Lab to unexpectedly remove 24 power from the board. Remember, one of the conditions I said for snapping in my mind is, can I unexpectedly remove power from the opponent's board? And in this case I can, and I can also play Lizard to that location as well, which will put my power there at 20 and my opponent's at 0. So potentially after turn 5 and 6 I could be up 26 to 4 at Stark Tower and 20 to 0 at Gamma Lab, pending what my opponent plays on turn 5 and 6. This is a very strong position and one in which I will snap, almost certainly, though I don't remember if I do it after turn 5 or 6. There I go. Before I press end turn, I snap on turn 5 because I have overwhelming power at Stark Tower. I will have overwhelming power at Gamma Lab, and I have the ability to unexpectedly remove a large amount of power from my opponent's side of the board. I don't know what my opponent has played at Dark Dimension, nor do I care. I will concede that location based on the near certainty in my mind that I will win Gamma Lab. Now in this case, my opponent is able to unexpectedly remove power from Stark Tower. However, he makes a mistake in that situation, in my opinion. And the mistake is that he didn't leave Shang-Chi for turn 6. When you have the ability to unexpectedly remove power from the opponent's board, if it's at all possible, do it on turn 6. Do it on turn 6 so your opponent doesn't have the opportunity to retreat before you go to showdown. Now, sometimes it won't be possible because you've got Shang-Chi to play on turn 4 and you've got exceptional plays on turn 5 and 6, and if you waited until 6 to play Shang-Chi, you would significantly reduce your own power on your side. Don't really want to do that, so it's not always possible, but if it's at all possible, save your Shang-Chi plays for turn 6. In this case, even if my opponent's Shang-Chi play had dramatically changed the situation in his favor, he would only have gained 2 cubes instead of 4. In this situation, I'm still up by 5 at Stark Tower, so I probably just change my plan here and I play Shang-Chi at Gamma Lab, and then I play Nightcrawler Ant-Man at Stark Tower, or I play Nightcrawler to Gamma Lab and Ant-Man to Stark Tower or something like that. I'm not deterred. Nonetheless, I've already snapped, but I'm not deterred from going to showdown for sure. So I do that. I'm going to add 4, 5, 6, 12 power to Stark Tower. I'll be at 28 to 11, 15 to 0 at Gamma Lab. I would 100% snap in this situation if I hadn't already done that. If I were in my opponent's situation, I would 100% retreat. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I would not 100% retreat in this situation because my opponent has no idea that I have Shang-Chi. All he sees is he's up by 12 at Gamma Lab. If I were in my opponent's situation, to be honest, I would probably play more cards to Dark Dimension, and if I had a lot of power there, I would probably be snapping myself in this situation. And I would just accept that if my opponent has Shang-Chi, I'd lose, because it's almost impossible to predict when that's the case. So I would not 100% retreat in my opponent's situation, and I don't think he would be making a mistake to go to showdown here. Now, playing to Stark Tower with that Wolfsbane is not a great play, because all I have to do there is add 3 power. Basically, any card there adds the 3 power to win Stark Tower. And the end result is a win for 4 cubes. So they weren't confident enough to snap on that. Moving on to the next game, we're at turn 5. I've played Mr. Fantastic to the Space Throne, essentially conceding that location. And I'm looking at a play of Iron Man at Baxter Building, which will double my power there, and a play of Spectrum at Bar Sinister, which will add 8 power to Space Throne. I'll be up 10 to 5 there. Well, plus if Iron Man wins Baxter Building, it will subtract my opponent's power by 3 there, so I'll be at 10 to 3 at Space Throne. I'll be at 20 to 0 at Bar Sinister, and I'll be at a lot at Baxter Building because Spectrum will add plus 8 to each of my ongoing because it will get duplicated 3 times at Bar Sinister. That is a lot of power I'll be adding to the board. Overwhelming power at 3 different locations, and therefore this is an automatic snap. On my opponent's side, it really depends on what they're aiming to play in terms of whether this is a snap or not. If my opponent has Iron Man, he'll be in pretty good shape as well, and that's not terribly unlikely. It's not super unlikely that he could have that card, which is why I haven't snapped yet. Wanted to see what my opponent played on turn 5. He plays Claw, which means I am going to lose the Space Throne, but I'm guaranteed to win Bar Sinister, so I'm not upset about that. As I am guaranteed to win Bar Sinister with Spectrum, and I can project 8 power per ongoing card to Baxter Building, which will then be doubled by Iron Man. It is inconceivable to me that I would lose this game, and therefore it's an automatic snap, hoping all the while that my opponent decides to snap 2 or go to Showdown. And they do decide to snap 2, being up by 11 at Bar Sinister and up by 21 at Space Throne. I don't think I would have snapped in their situation, but of course it's possible this is a bot, and given that they play Ant-Man at Space Throne, yeah, probably a bot, but going to end up with a huge amount of power at Clintar. 94 power there. Yep. So an 8 cube win. Hopefully that one was a pretty obvious why I chose to snap there. Moving on to the next game. We're up by 5 at Los Diablos, 6 at the Ruins, and we've got Claw Iron Man for turn 5 and 6. Given that I don't have Spectrum, this is not an incredibly strong position. I can go up by at least 8 at the Ruins, but Los Diablos is more of a problem, and depending on what my opponent plays on turn 5, my position might not be that strong there. So for me, this would be a very risky snap. I'll be at 13 to 2 at Los Diablos, but if my opponent plays a strong card there, I may not be in very good shape at all. I'm going to lose Wakanda, that's fine. And my opponent plays Hobgoblin, which puts me up by only 3 at Los Diablos, and really no conceivable way to get to that plus 8 or plus 9 magic number. And therefore I would consider this a very risky snap. I can play Iron Man, which will add only 5 power to Los Diablos. I'll be at 10 to 8. And I can't add anything to the Ruins, so I'll be up by 8 at Los Diablos and 9 at the Ruins. It's an okay position. It's definitely worth going to Showdown. It may even be worth snapping. But there are a lot of cards that could top me at Los Diablos. Up by only 8, it's entirely possible that my opponent just plays a relatively mediocre 8 drop to Los Diablos with his 6 power. Coming up with 8 power on 6 energy is not difficult to do, and if he did that, we would go to differential. I would win the differential, so he does need to come up with 9 power. Still, coming up with 9 power on 6 mana, or 6 energy, is not that difficult. Therefore, this would be a risky snap. I'd really want 10 power at both locations. I'd say 10 is a good magic number for determining when to snap. So I decide I'll get Captain America down for 6 power. He's more power than Iron Man. So now what's the situation? We're up 11 to 2. That's plus 9 at Los Diablos. With Mr. Fantastic, it's up 13 to 2. That's plus 11. And we'll be up 16 to 5 at the Ruins. That's 11 at one location, 13 at the other. That's a pretty strong position. That's pretty strong. That makes this snap much less risky. However, the large number of slots that my opponent has on his side of the board scares me, which is why I decide not to snap. Even though I'm up by 11 and up by 13 at my locations, I am at a significant slot disadvantage, which means there are a number of different card combinations which my opponent could play. I haven't received that much information about his deck. He only needs to flip one of the locations. So I'm definitely confident enough to go to Showdown, but not confident enough to snap, though you could make the argument that being up 11 and up 13, I should have snapped here. And I may have left cubes on the table by not doing that, because I do expect to win this a lot of the time, but the reason I didn't snap is because it made me very nervous that my opponent had so many slots available at both locations. And he does play 3 cards to Los Diablos. He nerfs my Lizard, which is another factor which I didn't mention but should mention now, is that yes, I was up 13, but if Lizard got nerfed, then it drops down to only 10 power at the location, so I'd be up by less. However, Carnage then unfilled the location. So my opponent ends up with only 9 power there. And I do get the win. You could make an argument for snapping in that one. But the reason I didn't is because it made me nervous that my opponent had so many slots available in which to play cards at both locations. There were a wide variety of options open to him at that point, and I was nervous that one of those options would lead to him topping me at one of those locations. Moving on to the next game, we arrive at turn 5. I am trailing at the Ruins by 1, trailing at New York by 5. It's likely that I never intended for Nightcrawler to end up at New York. He's going to get moved to Ruins or Hellfire because I do have Warpath in the deck, and it looks like my turn 5 play is going to be Warpath Ant-Man with Iron Man on turn 6. Hard to predict where I'm going to end up power-wise after those plays are done. I do think my position is pretty strong. Playing Warpath, I'll be up by 9 at the Ruins and 7 at Hellfire Club. That's pretty strong, but I'm not going to snap until I see what my opponent is going to play. And my opponent commits the cardinal sin of filling up the Ruins before turn 6. Probably the most common mistake that I see in the early ranks. And that is going to mean that once I move Nightcrawler, Warpath is going to be plus 4, so I'll have 13 at the Ruins. My opponent could conceivably be playing Blue Marvel, so I want to get up to at least 16 at the Ruins. If I move Nightcrawler there, I'll buff Ant-Man by 3, Nightcrawler by 2, Warpath by 4, so I'll be at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 at the Ruins. That's more than enough. And then I can go ahead and play Iron Man to go plus 8 at Hellfire Club, or Spectrum to go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at Hellfire Club, plus additional at the Ruins. That's more than enough to justify a snap, as I'll have a 15 power lead at Hellfire Club and a guaranteed win at Ruins. This is an automatic snap 100% of the time. If you're in the opponent's situation, you should retreat from this situation 100% of the time. Opponent is snapped with a lead of 7, and you can't add any more power to Ruins, or at least can't add significant unexpected power to the Ruins. If your opponent's confident in this situation, you should be retreating. I will be at 16 to 1. I don't know that I thought that through all the way. Probably should have played Spectrum in this situation. My opponent plays Khazar Angela, so they did have the ability to add 1-2 additional power to the ruins, but since I accounted for them potentially getting 4 more power there, that's no problem, and this is a 4-cube victory. Hopefully, you viewers are starting to see a pattern in these wins. That pattern being guaranteed lane wins lead to snaps and large victories. Large power deficit or large power differences in our favor at locations lead to snaps. If we don't have that, we're either going to a showdown for 2 cubes or we are retreating. And it is likely, if you're struggling to climb, that one of the reasons is that you are going to showdown or even snapping when you think to yourself, I have a chance to win, not I am very, very likely or guaranteed to win, which is what I'm looking for when I go to a showdown for 4 or 8 cubes. In this situation, we're going to get a 0 cost 6 card from the raft. Of course, it seems my opponent is likely to as well. However, my opponent has 3 power at Luke's bar. Not good, because it's hard to get power there. I have Claw to project power to Luke's bar. However, I will have almost no way to get a lot of power at Throne Room, though that could change depending on what my 6 cost card is. Now, when you have games like this where you know your opponent's going to have a card in hand, it's going to be a strong card and it could be anything, don't snap. That is a good rule of thumb. If your opponent got a 6 cost card from the raft, don't snap. I have made this mistake before myself many times. I've been bitten by it enough times to give this recommendation. Do not snap in games with large amounts of RNG. We're looking to snap in games where we know what's going to happen and we guarantee that it will be in our favor. Doesn't mean we'll always be right, but that's what we're looking for, and you can never, ever guarantee that the game is going to be in your favor when your opponent's got a random 0 cost 6 card in their hand. So in this situation, I'm doing my best. The opponent hasn't snapped yet, so I can continue playing. Can play Claw at Luke's bar. I know my opponent is playing a movement deck. I've identified that from the Multiple Man, the Doctor Strange, and the Iron Fist. Therefore, I can expect that he will play Heimdall on turn 6, and I have to account for that. In this situation, my opponent fills up the left location entirely. My 6 cost card is useless. It's literally 0 power with no way to increase that. I am winning by 3 at the raft. I am winning by 5 at Luke's bar. I can expect to lose Luke's bar when my opponent plays Heimdall and moves Cloak and Multiple Man there. I have no conceivable way to win Luke's bar. I know if my opponent plays Heimdall at Throne Room that its power there will be doubled to 16. The card with the highest power gets doubled to 16. Therefore, he will have 19 power there after the Multiple Man replicates. I also know he has the ability to move cards around with his Cloak. He could move Vulture for more power. My odds of winning this game are 0. Unless my opponent just didn't have Heimdall, even in that situation, I think with my opponent's ability to move around unpredictably, and the fact that he's snapped, this will be an auto retreat. There is no way to satisfy my conditions for snapping. My opponent has snapped, so I must assume that he can satisfy his conditions for snapping. I don't know what his conditions are, but I will give him credit for a good play, as players rarely bluff in Marvel Snap, I find. Therefore, the only option I can see here is to retreat. I would never ever go to a showdown in that situation for 4 cubes. Moving on to the next game, we've got a lead of 9 at the hub and significant board advantage, with the opponent filling 3 slots with relatively low power cards and me only filling 1 slot. We have a lead at Stark Tower and we're even on board advantage. I do have Nightcrawler there, but the ability to move him away and play another card there gives us equal position there. I'm in a very strong position. A lead at 2 locations and board advantage at one of those locations. This would be a situation in which I would almost always snap. In this case, I opt to play Taskmaster, I think, to copy the Warpath, which I played on turn 4. So that will add 9 power to the location. And then I can play Iron Man at Stark Tower or the hub, depending on where they're needed. So in this situation, my opponent fills 2 locations prior to turn 6. He kills my Nightcrawler with Electra, which gives him a lead of 2 power there. He has lost the hub. There is no conceivable way for him to win that location. And given that I have a power deficit of only 4 power at Stark Tower, this should be an automatic retreat for the opponent. Instead, he snaps. It is likely that is a bot. However, if it is a player, that is an absolutely terrible snap. To imagine that with 6 energy available, I could not get 5 power down at Stark Tower. Now, even if my opponent has Blue Marvel to play on the final turn or the Dino, it's likely a Dino deck with the Moon Girl. So Dino will go down to Project Pegasus. He'll win Project Pegasus. I don't care. I could play almost anything to Stark Tower and win that location. In this case, Iron Man will do it with room to spare. I'll be Blue Marvel proof at both locations. I will happily go to a showdown in this situation and expect to win all of the time. In this case, we've talked repeatedly in this video about guaranteed wins at locations being a prime condition for snapping, and I have guaranteed wins at 2 locations. That is the ideal. That's Christmas in Marvel Snap. And it is an easy 8 cube win. Up next, we have a situation where there is a small hand size due to the Super Flow being on the table. My opponent has 3 cards at the Super Flow, which is terrible for him all game. I have Captain America and Spectrum in hand. We are on turn 5, but I have 6 energy. I have a lead of 8 at New York, 9 at Tinkerer's Workshop. The 8 at New York could be less than it seems because my opponent has the ability to move cards there if he chooses. However, most of his cards on the table have small power values, which is not going to serve him that well. I have, as always, left a slot open at Tinkerer's Workshop with the ability to move Nightcrawler away and play something else if I choose. Being up by 8 and up by 9 and with equivalent board position and Spectrum in hand for the late game power burst, I consider this a very strong position. Spectrum falls into the category of unexpected late game power burst. It may not be unexpected at high ranks, but at lower ranks it certainly will be, and therefore I am snapping. I can add, I'm checking to see how many cards my opponent has in hand there. And my opponent nerfs my position at Tinkerer's Workshop a little bit by decreasing the power of the Lizard, and he plays Spider-Woman, which is a pretty strong play in this position. However, once again, a very, very common theme in this video, my opponent has filled a location prior to turn 6, and this allows me the foreknowledge necessary to determine whether I want to retreat or not, as I can guarantee or at least figure with a high degree of certainty whether I will win at Tinkerer's Workshop or not. In this case, my spectrum play there will be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 because there's 3 ongoing cards there. That will put me at 20 to 15. That makes me blue marvel proof. It doesn't make me claw proof though. Nonetheless, my opponent has not shown that they are playing an ongoing deck, therefore I do not assume claw. If claw comes, then I'll lose and I'll accept the loss. My play is going to be Spectrum. I'll move Nightcrawler. He gets the 1 power at New York, +1 for Captain America will be 18 to 3 there, and a guaranteed win at Tinkerer's Workshop. This is absolutely a snap spot if I hadn't already. And as predicted, win by 3. Now that's not as much as I thought. I must have miscounted somewhere. Oh, I forgot about Nightcrawler moving away. So I actually wasn't Blue Marvel proof. I could have lost to Blue Marvel there. And that wasn't impossible that my opponent would have Blue Marvel. However, I snapped on turn 5 and I was confident in it. And my opponent did have a big play on turn 6, a 5 cost 11 power card essentially. But we do get the win. Next up, we've got a situation where I am going to lose the flooded location with near 100% certainty. My opponent has Sunspot on the board. In pool 1 or 2, Sunspot often means Infinite. So we'll be watching for the opponent to skip turn 5. And if he skips turn 5 and doesn't play anything, then we will assume he's got Infinite. And if I can't beat Infinite, I will concede. Anytime you see Sunspot in pool 1 or 2, automatically think Infinite. Anytime your opponent skips turn 5, give him credit for the Infinite and make your decision accordingly. I have Claw and Iron Man for my turn 5-6 play, along with a Vibranium. My position is not terrible. However, if I want to play Claw at Central Park, I'll be committing my own cardinal sin of filling up a location prior to turn 6. I don't like doing that, but I don't have much choice because the flooded location means I'm not playing cards there. And the squirrels are clogging up the board. If it wasn't for the squirrels, I'd be okay. Now, in this situation, my opponent did skip turn 5, which means he has Infinite. I'm up 17 to 1 at Central Park. I'm up 12 to 9 at Vibranium Mines. Can I beat Infinite? With Central Park full, I cannot. My opponent can simply play Infinite there. He'll be at 21 to 17. I'd still beat him with Spectrum if I played. But if I played Spectrum and he plays Infinite to Vibranium Mines, I simply lose. I can play Iron Man to Vibranium Mines along with a Vibranium, and I will go up by 16, so 28 power there. That doesn't beat Infinite either. No, I'd be at 32 power there. That does beat Infinite. So this would come down to a gamble. Do I think my opponent would play Infinite to Central Park or Vibranium Mines? I don't like to go to a showdown on a 50-50. Other viewers may have their preferences concerning 50-50s, but if it comes down to a coin flip decision for me, I will back out and look for a better spot to get my cubes in the middle. I don't like coin flips. They're high variance. During this ranked climb, I never dropped more than 3 ranks. After I switched to the Spectrum ongoing deck, I never dropped more than 1 rank. I don't like big swings. They're tilting. Try to avoid them. Therefore, I avoid coin flips. So I will back out of this one, preferring not to coin flip on where my opponent is going to play Infinite. If I had to guess, he probably plays it to Vibranium Mines, but that's only a guess. He could play it at Central Park. It is guaranteed there, unless I played Spectrum. Moving on, we're looking at a turn 5 board where I'm up by 9 at Onslaught Citadel with ongoing effects doubled, up by 4 at Atalan, And I have left myself 2 slots at Atalan compared to my opponent's 2. With Claw and Iron Man on turns 5 and 6, this is a reasonably strong spot to be in. Playing Claw at Atalan will only tie me at Wakandan Embassy and will put me up 18 to 8 there. It's a reasonable play. I believe my opponent may be playing a movement deck here with Iron Fist on the table. I do think my position is strong enough to snap in, being up by 10 at Atalan, 9 by Onslaught Citadel, and with good options for my turn 6. Now, Vision comes down, and that makes this a tenuous position because I'm going to lose Wakandan Embassy. Well, if my opponent moves Vision away from there, I won't necessarily lose Wakandan Embassy. Movement decks are a bad matchup for my deck. If my opponent plays Heimdall to Wakandan Embassy and moves Vision to Atalan, I will win. If my opponent plays Heimdall to Atalan, I will lose at Atalan. I will win Onslaught Citadel. If my opponent plays Heimdall to Wakandan Embassy, I will lose Wakandan Embassy. Vision and Iron Fist will add 15 to Atalan. I will lose there. This is a spot where it's very, very hard to predict what's going to happen. And as it's very hard to predict what's going to happen and my opponent is snapped, I consider it reasonably likely that he has the win. I can add 6 power to Atalan. I could play Mr. Fantastic as well. I was trying to think through all of the options available to me. It's entirely possible that I get the win, but as I've discussed earlier, I don't much care for entirely possible as an answer to are you going to win. Usually we're looking for better spots than that to get our cards in. However, I do allow this to go to showdown, and what we're looking at here as a final showdown situation is 10, 16, 17, 18, 19, up by 11 at Atalan, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, up by 18 at Onslaught Citadel. So I don't know for sure what my opponent is going to do, but my position is very strong. Now likely Lizard will get nerfed, which will put him at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16 to 8 at Atalan. Very, very easy for me to lose there. And this is likely a spot where I made a mistake by going to showdown. All my opponent has to do is play Heimdall at Atalan and I lose. Well, yeah, I lose because Nightcrawler would move to Wakandan Embassy. He and Iron Fist take that location. Vision and Heimdall add 17 to Atalan. Lower me by 3. This is a mistake to go to showdown here. I got fooled by the high numbers, I think. Another reason why my opponent had slot advantage. 2 slots available at Atalan to my 3. 3 slots available to Onslaught Citadel. I also had 3 there, so that's not really a downside. But my opponent did have slots available, and I think in this case I simply forgot about Vision. I got tunnel vision thinking about the Heimdall plays, and I simply forgot about Vision. And that's why I lost this one. But I should have retreated there and not gone to showdown. Moving on, we've got 2 more games we're going to look at. In this situation, I have Claw, Iron Man, and Spectrum. I am trailing by 1 at Nova Roma. We're even on location advantage. I am up by 9 at Subterranea, but I am trailing on location advantage there. I have options here. I can play Claw to Nova Roma. I'll go up by 7 power at Subterranea. I will fill the location early, which I don't like to do. However, I'm filling it with the option of adding 8 additional power to Subterranea later. That is hard to account for opponents, and is one of the only situations with this deck in which I'm okay with filling a location before turn 6. I'll do it if I have to, but when I don't have to, I don't want to. Except if I have Spectrum and all the cards there are ongoing. That's such a big power spike I can provide that I'll accept filling the location. Now my opponent makes the cardinal error once again. As I've said many times in this video, he makes the error of filling his location before turn 6, guaranteeing that I know what my power there is. And I can see that I'm up by 8 there, therefore I don't need to play Spectrum. I'm Blue Marvel proof there. All I need to do is play Iron Man to Nova Roma, boost myself up to 20 to his 5. He only has 1 slot. That's a guaranteed snap, and my opponent makes the correct play in this situation and retreats. That is what I would have done as well. Last game we'll look at. Here I am up by 3 at Nidavellir, even on location advantage. I'm trailing by 1 at Dagger Room, and I'm down 1 in location advantage, and I'm up by 2 at Sewer System. I've got Claw, and then I don't have a good play for turn 6. This is not a situation in which I'm confident. If my opponent snaps, I'm likely retreating. I simply have to risk losing Danger Room because I guess that I have to win Sewer System in order to win this game. So I'm going to risk Claw getting zapped by the Danger Room, in which case I would simply retreat and take the 1 cube loss. Now my opponent adds 6 power to Danger Room, so I'm trailing by 6 at Nidavellir, trailing by 3 at Danger Room. However, I do draw Iron Man, so that gives me a good turn 6 play. I can play Iron Man and Armor to Nidavellir. I will add a lot of power there. How much power will I add? 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. This will be a 28 doubled to 56. So I'll be up by 33 there and up by 8 at Sewer System. It's good. Well, 9 if you count the -1 there. It's probably good enough to snap. I don't know if I do snap here, but if I'm up 56 to 23 at Nidavellir and up 8 to 0 at Sewer System, that's good enough to snap. Now I also have the option of playing Shang-Chi and killing his Claw and potentially whatever else he plays at Nidavellir if he plays anything, because cards here have +5 power and he reveals first. So I could get a huge kill there. Playing Shang-Chi will give me +9 there, so I'll be at 26 and he'll be -9. And he can't play anything big there. So that's why I choose this play, because it also allows me to add 5 power to Sewer System. Well, 4 power and put me at 12. I mean, that's good enough for a snap. Unexpectedly removing power from my opponent's board, and a lead of 12, 13, however you look at it at the other location, is good enough to snap on. And I will. And I'll hope it goes to showdown, and given that my Shang-Chi play will be unexpected, it's likely that it will go to showdown. And if my opponent plays something else to Nidavellir, then I just hope that it is a 4 power card or higher. And in this situation he plays Elektra, which kills my Ant-Man. And then I kill his Claw. Which ties us at Danger Room. And he wins by 1 at Nidavellir. Now, interestingly, he played his cards in the wrong order, I think. If he'd played Angela first at Danger Room and then Bishop, he would have, well, would he have ended up with more power? Yeah, I think he would have. If he played Angela, Bishop, and then Elektra, he would have ended up with 1 more power at the Danger Room, and I would have lost that game. I think the Shang-Chi was probably the wrong play there. Well, given if I knew he was going to play Electra, it would have been the wrong play. I thought that I might need the help at Sewer System. That's, I think, why I did it. Iron Man would have been a much safer play. Nonetheless, it works out. My opponent played his cards in the wrong order and cost himself 1 power, and so I get the win in this game. So hopefully that gives some idea of my thought process in how I choose when to snap and when to retreat. This is by far the most important aspect of the game in terms of whether you will climb the ladder or not. With what deck you choose being a close second, but snap strategy is very, very, very important and is likely the biggest weakness if you find yourself in a position where you're struggling to climb the ladder. So, hopefully that's helpful or at least entertaining, and thank you for watching.